The cost of Brexit is adding up for London as the world awaits a deal set for an October 31st deadline. Our next guest cites Brexit as the reason why London's reign at the center of the world's capital is at serious risk. And why other European financial firms are seeking to take its place. Joining us from London is Britain business editor for The Economist, Tamzin Booth. Thank you for being here. We've already seen people without Brexit leave London. I think you wrote about, or I was reading an article in which people who used to all be stationed in London are now stationed in Paris and running into their friends. So is London lost its leadership in the financial world already?
I think there's a great possibility of that. So my Economist cover story describes how, because of financial stability concerns and the need to avoid a cliff edge, really the city is living in a kind of parallel universe where a hard Brexit has already happened. So because of the loss of passporting, which comes with leaving the single market, and as you know, passporting is the regulatory right for London-based firms to sell across the EU27. So because of the loss of passporting, about 291 firms have already moved something to the EU27, whether that be staff or assets or opened offices and so on. About £1 trillion of assets has already moved off to the EU27 out of about 16 trillion. European government bond trading has already gone to Amsterdam and Milan. And so this is really a massive reversal of a trend, a really powerful trend for London over the past couple of decades, for London really to suck everything in from the rest of the EU27. So Asian banks, American investment banks, they've really centred their EMEA operations in London. But there's no doubt about it, if you talk to the heads of banks, of American ones, especially Asian ones, there's no doubt that London has really, the spell has been broken for London as the world's capital of capital. And we've lost our top position at the top of the ZYEN Global Financial Centres Index just recently. Right. And really, it's not just about Brexit. That's the thing. I mean, there's plenty of complacency, I think, about what Brexit will mean for the city. But it isn't just the loss of passporting. You've got two other factors at play here. The first is the loss of political stability. If you talk to banks, London's no longer perceived as a safe, reliable place the way it has been for decades. We're talking about Theresa May, the current Prime Minister, has not been a friend to the city. Boris Johnson said famously, FC UK business, and we could even have a radical left Labour government. So there are all of these threats. And what's more, the EU27 has made it perfectly clear that their aim is to grab as much financial business out of London and relocate it to the continent, to Frankfurt and Paris.
Tamzin, though, as you point out in your article, it's not as though those other locations are without their pitfalls as well, right? You talk about both the cultural allure of some of these other cities, but then other cities are seen as not as attractive for employees to move to. Also, the various regulatory regimes, both of the EU and then of the specific country. So what's the competitive landscape look like of some of the EU nations versus Britain at this point?
That's absolutely right. And if you look at the EU27 cities, it's really a kind of slugfest between Paris and Frankfurt. Paris is incredibly ambitious to get as much city business as it possibly can. And you've had President Macron really personally playing a big role in making the city attractive. And ironically, one of the advantages that Paris has is direct link to London with the Eurostar. So it's definitely possible to overstate the attraction of Paris, and Frankfurt is perceived as, possibly a little bit of a dull place to live, potentially. And so, yes, no, it's not all a straightforward move away from the city. And employees definitely have been quite rebellious about where they want to move. Banks at first, financial institutions at first thought they could, send people really where they wanted to, but that hasn't been the case. But the other risk is that I think for a lot of bankers facing relocation out of London, New York is going to be a preferred place, and I think Wall Street is looking forward to getting a lot of business because of Brexit.
All right, Tamzin Booth is the Britain business editor for The Economist. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.